Hounds, chase ghosts, coming, sleep, watch out, demons are coming, run, sleep, hide, spirits, ghosts, hide, demons, hounds, ghosts, demons are coming, spirits.
Hello, my little hellhounds. Welcome to Home of Scares. If you like the chills running down your spine and to be scared, fueled with anxiety, then join us twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And don't forget to increase your anxiety levels. Just make sure you subscribe. Sleep tight, my hellhounds. Tinder date tried to kill me. Posted by NamelessApparition. This was November 2016 in Glasgow, Scotland. I was desperate, I must admit. I'd been single and alone for some time, and it was driving me crazy. That's when I met Laura. She came across as a very sweet girl and all, but she was in a hurry to meet me, so I did. She insisted we go to the pub. No fancy dates were necessary for her. I don't mind this. At first glance, I knew I'd been swindled. She looked different from what I'd saw before, but I didn't mind. I was just happy to have a date. I'm not exactly good looking myself. I gave her a chance to redeem herself. We got talking, and after a few beers, things started to get more intimate. Before I go further, she was quite an overweight girl with long dark hair, and she had eyeshadow similar to Amy Winehouse. She said she was a huge fan. I'd asked her about her hobbies and interests, etc., but she asked me to talk more about myself. I told her about my job, and she yawned sarcastically. Let's talk about your sex life, she said. She had slipped her foot out of her shoe and started rubbing my groin with her bare foot. Needless to say, I was aroused. So yeah, I didn't have much to say in that department, as it had been a while since I had sex. I was very honest with her. I asked about hers, and she said she has her kinks, and that she's done things that I'd never have imagined. Wanna see what I can do? She said, let's go to my place. So at this point I was starting to feel very drunk, which I was amazed at this. I was only on to my 4th pint. I did have 2 shots though, and put it down to this. We'd waited for a taxi. She was holding my hand excitedly, whispering into my ear that she was going to do some things to me that I'd never experienced before. In a way, I actually couldn't wait to just sleep. My head felt heavier than the rest of my body. It was like the ground was moving beneath my feet. The rest was a blur. I couldn't even remember getting into the taxi, but I do remember falling down the stairs, and she was above me laughing at me. "Come on," she said, "get your sexy ass up here." I struggled up the stairs, and before I know it, from what I remember, I was in her bedroom naked. It was like I'd blacked out. I tried to sit up, only to find myself tied to the bed by my arms and legs. Then she entered the room, dressed in bondage gear. I was deeply aroused, but confused at the same time. She performed sex acts on me before having full intercourse. I lay there delighted. Don't get me wrong, but something still felt off about it all. I had dozed off for a bit, and I'd been woken up by a weird screeching sound. "What are you doing?" I said as she was wrapping up my legs with cling film. "Hush now," she said. "This is the best bit." I was no longer tied to the bed, but I felt very numb and couldn't move my arms and legs. She kept wrapping me up from my legs upwards. I was screaming at her to stop, and she had placed some cling film in my mouth to shut me up. I was struggling to breathe at this point and had tried my best to dislodge the ball of cling film from my mouth. Eventually, I was totally wrapped from head to toe. I could barely see outside the cling film. She told me that this was my punishment for being terrible in bed, and that she has many other victims just like me, all wrapped up, waiting to die. She left the room, and I gave out some muffled screams. Then I felt myself slowly fading away. I woke up what was now the next day, now able to breathe. This time there were people looking at me. They'd removed most of the cling film and had resuscitated me. I wasn't aware of this till they told me. It had turned out that I wasn't actually at Laura's flat, but an old-fashioned hotel. The police were all over me, asking me questions about what had happened. I attempted to show them her Tinder profile, but she had deleted the page. I am grateful to my rescuers that had saved me, but forever traumatized by this incident, and I end up with panic attacks when I see people that are similar to her. It took me a few years to finally trust people enough to go on dates, but I am still on the road to recovery mentally. I'm just glad that I'm still alive, but wondering if she's still out there, and if there are others like me that didn't make it. I was almost kidnapped in front of my parents. Posted by Super Sneaky Kitty 3. This was back in November of 2018, and it takes place in North Carolina. I was 14 at the time. My family and I had just moved across states. We had just gotten to the city where we planned on living. After a long road trip, we were all hungry, so decided to grab dinner before we went to pick up the keys to our new house. We went to this local pizza shop. Since we had our dogs with us, because we hadn't moved into our house yet, we decided to eat in the car. I'm a pretty fast eater compared to the rest of my family, so I finished way before them. After I was done, I decided to bring my puppy out to do her business. We were standing just a little ways up from the car, playing in the leaves on the ground. I grew up in Florida, so I wasn't used to seeing piles of autumn leaves, so was just living my best life, not paying attention to my surroundings, when a man taps on my shoulder. My dog notices him and immediately tries to jump on him, as she does with anyone. So I pull her back while I'm backing away from him. He looks to be in his mid-40s to 50s. He smiles creepily at me, like it was forced. He says in his scruffy southern voice, "You have my dog, my border collie." Immediately a red flag goes off in my mind, as my dog looks very obviously like a boxer, nothing like a border collie. Now, let me tell you, I'm horrible at confrontation, so I just say nervously, "I think you're mistaken, sir. This is my dog," not even telling him how my dog does not look anything like what he was describing. I look over to my parents' car that was just a couple of feet ahead of me, unsure what to do. They hadn't even noticed the man approach me. They were on their phones. The man now asks me, "Well, would you be able to come help me look for my dog?" I can feel my stomach drop in that moment. I still don't want to make a scene, as I'm probably overreacting, but I have read my fair share of kidnapping and sex trafficking horror stories, so I have an idea in the back of my mind on what's going down. He then says something along the lines of, "I have some money in my truck for you," if I went with him. My hands are sweating at this point. This is something straight out of a Reddit thread. He points over to a very sketchy, run-down looking truck. I tell him I'm busy and have to go, but best of luck to finding his dog. Still trying to keep him on my good side. Looking back on it now, I don't know why I didn't tell him my parents were right there. If I would have, I think he would have backed off. I overly worry about what others might think, so I was just trying to be polite. and not make him mad. He then decides to grab my dog's leash and say he had dog treats at his truck and starts to walk away with my dog. I pull the leash away from him and say sternly, I have to go now. As I start walking away, he then grabs my wrist and rips the leash out of my hands, throwing it to the ground. He starts pulling me with him, mumbling something like, just come see what I have for you. My dog, the sweet good girl she is, follows after us and starts barking, while he starts to drag me with him. I am pretty small, 5'4", and have no upper body strength, so I just start screaming to let go of me. My parents alarmed, hearing me scream and our dog chasing after me barking. See this man pulling their daughter against her will. They immediately start sprinting after me. I start screaming, Mom, Dad. I think he's got alarmed when he heard me yell out, Mum, as she starts running towards us. The sudden realization that my parents were right there in their car the whole time. He makes a run for it, and we didn't run after him. My parents were just glad they had me. This is definitely not a good way to start off our new life in North Carolina. Not even have lived there a day yet. I do not wish this to ever happen to anyone, as it was terrifying. But my advice for you is, don't be afraid to use your words. Even if they offend the person, then is not the time to worry about what others think. Old house owner is a very, very creepy man. Posted by Tacobellfury. This story happened about 4 years ago when I was 15 years old and we moved into this house. Sorry about grammar and stuff, me no good at it. Backstory: we live in a very small tourist town. School K-12 in one building and population of 700. Not during tourist season, kind of small. There was this weird druggie that everyone knew and hated. He lived in one of his parents' houses and did not pay rent, so they decided to kick him out. My parents were friends with the family and helped take care of his kids when he couldn't, so we were on pretty good terms. They gave the druggie, I'll call him D for short, 30 days to move out for failing to pay a single rent check in his miserable life. We weren't doing very well at all financially and needed somewhere to stay or rent. We began talking to Dee's parents about the house, and they said we could begin renting to buy as soon as he moves out. The 30-day mark came around, and we asked Dee if he was ready, and he acted like he knew nothing about what we were talking about. So his parents said they were just going to give him some extra days and help him move his stuff. So we waited another month. At this point, the current place we were staying, we had to move out of in a few days. We went to the house and went inside to see all of these stuff still there. We decided we couldn't wait and just bagged his stuff up and told him to pick it up. Fast forward about a year. We always heard scurrying like mice and stuff in the ceiling, but we have a ton of strange animals like mice, snakes, lizards, chinchillas, etc. One of our 4 snakes went missing from its closed tank, with clips holding down the lid. There were no holes anywhere to be found. We didn't think anything of it, but it was a bit strange. Eventually, we started hearing louder sounds, and our dad said it was just the house settling. Stuff was disappearing from the fridge. Electrical bills went up. We smelt smoke, etc. Us kids got blamed for all of it and got our phones and my PC taken away. But the power bill was still up, and I also got blamed for smoking in the house, which my parents had no reason to believe or prompt this accusation. So I was grounded until graduation. I was mad now because I did not smoke in our house. I was unbelievably bored one day, not being able to do anything. So I decided to explore the attic. I opened the door. Holy shit. My mum then came right up the ladder, ready to beat me, and saw it too. A bed, microwave, mini fridge, cigarettes, unsmoked blunts, etc. Guess who? It's Druggy. He then came back that night through my little sister's window. He was higher than I've ever seen a person and admitted to a bunch of stuff, and we recorded it all. He took the snake and let it loose to get rid of the mice. He smoked in our house. He snuck in through my little sister's room every night. But none of this puts this in let's not meet now, does it? In court, he then admitted to making a small hole in the floor of the attic to watch my little 11-year-old sister sleep at night. We changed all locks, got a Ring doorbell, placed higher security locks on all the windows, and more. And the worst part of it all, this creep only got 6 months probation for marijuana possession, which wasn't yet legal in my state. He got only 1 year of prison for breaking and entering for an entire year, almost every day. What kind of bullshit system is that? He did have to pay a pretty heavy fine for damages and had to pay us back a year's worth of electric bills. We are now out of debt, and my parents are living steadily because he finally finished paying all the fines to us. My sister has to go to a therapist twice a week and might never get a good night's sleep again. He argued with me on the first date and called me a cheat. Posted by JailBaitJanet. I met this guy in a nightclub. We'd got on really well and even kissed. He was a lot older than me. I'm 23. He's almost 30. After a few texts, we'd arranged to meet up the following week. Now, I've only known this guy literally a week when all this happened. He took me to a really posh restaurant. He didn't tell me where the date was going to be, but only to meet him at the train station. He was dressed very smart, with a shirt and tie. I was wearing a casual looking dress, so I felt really out of place. I apologized for this. He seemed okay with it. We had dinner and things were going well. I was a little nervous. First date nerves, additional to the anxiety I already had. I'd excused myself and went to the toilet to calm my nerves. So we were into dessert when he asked me if I had a boyfriend or other boyfriends, to which I replied no. He pulled his glasses off and stared me down. You have 4 boyfriends. I saw it on Facebook. Why are you looking at my Facebook? I said. He said he'd done his research on me while I was in the toilet. He asked who certain names were. Why were they messaging me on a regular basis? I told him they were friends from school, but he failed to believe me. He said that girls can't simply be friends with boys without sex being involved. I'd asked him what any of this had to do with him, and he said to me, well, if you want this relationship to continue, you should let go of them all. We'd ended up in a debate full row over this. I told him to not get ahead of himself, and this was the first date and only a week from meeting him. I called off dessert and left. He tried to grab my arm to stop me leaving, so I poured my drink over his head and ran off as fast as I could. I was at the bus stop sobbing my eyes out when he had tried to phone me. I put my phone on silent. When I got home, I had over 40 missed calls. I sent him a text telling him to stop or I'd report him to the police. I then received a total of 100 texts from him calling me a slut and a cheating whore. He also mocked me for how I dressed, saying that he's a man of class and that I've offended him with dressing like a slut. I thought my dress was reasonable, as I was never into short skirts or dressing glamorously. He then went onto Facebook and posted my profile pic in an attempt to expose me, saying I was a 2-time cheating slut and warning people to avoid dating me, and that I'd ordered expensive meals on the date and left him to pay the bill. This left me horrified and didn't exactly help my anxiety. I had reported him to the police, but all they'd done was take down notes and told me to report again if I hear any more from him. He had stopped after my dad saw how upset I was getting, and he phoned him up and threatened to beat the hell out of him. Also, people complained about him on Facebook and sent him hate mail, forcing him to delete his profile. It took me a while to get outside the house, let alone go on dates again, but I'm slowly and surely getting there. Stalker Jill was waiting for me at the bus stop for over an hour. Posted by MysteryProtagonist. This is all about a girl that I met on the bus on the way to work. She was an average looking ginger-headed girl, but dressed herself up to look really pretty. By coincidence, she'd be on the same bus every single day. One day the bus was very busy and I'd ended up sitting next to her. I was minding my own business when she started chatting me up. She seemed quite interesting, but a little over enthusiastic about being on the dating scene, asking if I was single and stuff. We'd meet again on my way back to work, and this became a routine for the next few months. So after a brief few months of conversations, she said to me, "So you gonna ask me out or what?" So I did. I didn't see her as girlfriend material. She was a bit too glamorous for me. I felt flattered and all, but I'd arranged a date with her anyway, so we had a meal together after work, and it all went well, and I'd ended up back at her place. I was confused though, cause her place was nowhere near where I lived. We'd go on the same bus every day on our way to work, so I had a feeling this wasn't her house. She'd normally be 2 stops away from me. This was way too far from the bus stop and had a train station next to it. I'd seen some toys, obviously for a toddler, and I'd asked her about them. She said it was for her niece. This didn't all add up, cause she said she was an only child. So, safe to say, you can use your imagination about what happened next. But after we'd cuddled up and stuff, and she had asked me to leave, she said she had to work in the morning and needed her sleep, which was fair enough. After this, I received a ton of texts from her talking about what a great night she had. I'd meant to ask her about the house we'd went to and some other things that didn't match up, but for some reason my instincts were telling me not to ask. One day I'd slept in and I'd caught a later bus. She just happened to get on that bus. I just put it down to coincidence. I was too busy trying not to be late for it to even cross my mind. But there came a point where I was becoming stressed out with my job, and due to lack of enthusiasm, I'd been late a lot. Going to work became a chore. Also, as much as I'd grown to like Jill, I was getting fed up seeing her face every day and her constant texting. We went on a few dates together, but when I'd looked her up and made a friend request to add her on Facebook, I noticed she had already changed her status to in a relationship. Not only that, she had half a dozen photos of me and her together. I scratched my head at this point, as I can't remember even getting a photo taken with her. According to her, we'd been on holiday together, and she'd boast about having sex with me constantly. I felt baffled and so embarrassed and disgusted at the same time. I couldn't wait to confront her on this, but didn't even know where to begin. So, on this day in particular, I decided to be late on purpose, and as it happens, she got on the bus. I couldn't wait to confront her on everything. I showed her the Facebook page and she dismissed it as a joke, claimed it was done for laughs. I told her it wasn't really funny, and in fact really weird and creepy as hell. We'd ended up in a heated argument about it that nearly got us thrown off the bus. I told her to take down the pictures that were clearly photoshops taken from my own profile and edited. I told her not to talk to me again, and in the future get a different bus. She refused and said, why should I? She didn't even explain herself as to why she done it. She just acted as if she was justified to do what she done. I'd asked her to stay well out of my way in future. On the way back to work, I decided to head to the pub with my workmate to get my head around it all. I was on my way to the bus stop with my mate and she was there. Luckily, she never saw me, so we looked at her from the distance. I'd waited till the bus passed by and decided to run, only she had let the bus go by. A few buses passed and she was still waiting around, waiting for me. I got a taxi home that day. I'd reached out to a few people on Facebook group about her and asked if anyone had encountered her before, and it turned out that she had quite the reputation. She'd stalked and photoshopped many people that she'd fell for. Also, I found out that the house she took me to was an ex-boyfriend of hers, or should I say, ex-victim. She'd copied his keys so she could sneak around his house whenever he was away. He'd be away serving in the army for several months on end. Police are very useless when it comes to stalking, and they'd asked me to speak to a lawyer. Instead, it was more of a legal matter than a criminal offence. The most they could do was ask her to delete the fake photos of me and the slandering posts. By this point, she was spreading all sorts of rumours about me, claiming that I'd got her pregnant and asked her for an abortion, and I'd forced her to have sex with me, and I was the stalker. She'd still be on the same bus, but over time I'd end up getting taxis to work, and eventually I'd learn to drive, so at least one plus side came from it all. I'd blocked her number. On other numbers, I decided to change my number. Eventually, I'd moved house altogether. Thanks for listening. If you want to hear more creepy dating stories like this, then please drop a like and don't forget to subscribe. Sleep tight, hellhounds.